In December 1994, Dr. Jacobo Grinberg, one of Mexico's most prominent neuroscientists, vanished. At 47 years old, at the absolute peak of his career, he disappeared without leaving a single trace. No body was ever recovered. No formal charges were filed. A massive police investigation was launched, but then inexplicably aborted. Grinberg spent his life operating within the rigid boundaries of modern science. The orthodox view states that human consciousness is a passive byproduct of biology, neurons firing in the dark, generating the illusion of a self. Grinberg used rigorous, measurable science to prove that this materialistic view could not account for the reality of human experience, and the evidence suggests that is exactly why he disappeared. Grinberg was a meticulous, highly credentialed academic. He built his foundation at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, before moving on to advanced electrophysiology work at the New York Medical College. His obsession with the mind started with a personal tragedy. At 12 years old, he watched his mother die from a stroke caused by a brain tumor. That trauma drove him to ask one specific question: could a mind exist outside the fragile biological confines of a brain? He returned to Mexico and convinced UNAM to let him establish the National Institute for the Study of Consciousness. This was a serious facility. Grinberg published over 50 books and ran his lab using high-tech EEG equipment and strict peer-reviewed protocols. He was a decorated academic, risking his entire institutional reputation. He was taking the standard laboratory tools of Western neuroscience and using them to actively measure the supernatural. All of Grinberg's work culminated in what he called the Syntergic Theory. The core premise is that the brain does not generate reality. Instead, it acts as a biological transducer, decoding a signal from the outside. To understand how this works, we can look at this visualization of what Grinberg called the lattice. He proposed a continuous, holographic quantum field that contains all the data and information of the universe in a single, uniform matrix. Then we introduce the human brain. Your 12 billion firing neurons generate a colossal energetic output, which Grinberg called the neuronal field. This localized biological energy expands outward and intersects with that uniform matrix. The physical reality you perceive right now is simply the hyper-fast interference pattern created exactly where your neuronal field collides with the lattice. The interaction instantly resolves into recognizable, solid shapes. Syntergic theory frames human beings as biological engines, dynamically rendering the universe as they experience it. To move his work from philosophy to proof, Grinberg designed the transferred potential experiment. He aimed to test if two human brains could connect directly through the lattice without any sensory input. He implemented strict scientific controls. As we see in this schematic, he placed two meditating subjects in separate, electromagnetically shielded Faraday chambers, located nearly 15 meters apart. The data showed an anomaly. When researchers flashed a bright light at the first subject, their brain registered an evoked potential wave. Simultaneously, the second, entirely isolated subject's brain registered the exact same wave pattern. Grinberg argued this was an observation of macroscopic quantum entanglement. He believed he had documented the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen paradox occurring naturally within human neurobiology. Grinberg eventually took his heavy EEG machinery out of the university and into rural Mexico. He wanted to test the brains of indigenous shamans and healers during active ceremonies. His most controversial subject was a healer named Pachita. Grinberg spent years observing her in the operating room, where she allegedly materialized physical organs and performed complex surgeries without medical tools or anesthesia. Rather than dismissing this as magic or fraud, Grinberg analyzed it through his framework. He classified Pachita's brain state as achieving supreme neurosynergy, a frequency so highly coherent that she could manually reprogram the lattice to precipitate physical matter out of thin air. He reframed shamanism as an applied science of consciousness. To Grinberg, these healers were individuals whose brains were highly tuned to the universe's source code. In late 1994, Grinberg was preparing to scale his telepathy experiments. He wanted to test the transferred potential across intercontinental distances. Right as he prepared this final phase, he vanished. investigators found a trail of contradictions. His wife, Teresa Mendoza, gave conflicting accounts of his travel and cashed a $1,000 check from his accounts before vanishing herself. The lead investigator, Clemente Padilla, found enough evidence to pursue a formal inquiry, but the investigation was aborted, allegedly on orders from high-level government officials. Decades later, declassified CIA documents added a new layer to the mystery. A 1983 report on the Gateway process details holographic energy patterns that perfectly match Grinberg's lattice mechanics, indicating heavy intelligence agency interest in these exact concepts. His disappearance suggests his research transitioned into a matter of national security, crossing the line from academic interest into a functional technology. Theories of domestic murder or CIA abduction remain completely unproven. But while the criminal case went cold, the scientific community is slowly catching up to his ideas. Today, mainstream researchers at institutions like Stanford and Tufts are independently exploring models of biology as a non-local pattern space and investigating the exact neurobiology of extraordinary cognitive states. They are circling his ultimate hypothesis, that the boundary between the observer and the external universe is a biological illusion. Jacobo Grinberg's lasting legacy isn't the mystery of how he vanished. It is the scientific blueprint he left behind, showing that human beings are the active architects of reality itself.